Welcome everyone, this is Honest Restart. I am back from vacation, and today I want to talk about why I think we're definitely going to be seeing the return of an E3 style 2021 Nintendo Direct. I do think we're going to be seeing something along these lines this year. So for this video, what we're going to be talking about is why I think that's happening, when I think we'll sort of be expecting it, and what sort of content this big E3 Nintendo Direct could have. That's what we're focusing on today. Now before we jump into things, let me quickly talk about my social media. You may see a few different things here on screen. You can check those all out. They are linked in the description below. And of course, if you like what you're seeing here, you can subscribe, and if you want to see most of my content, maybe also hit that notification bell. And if you're feeling really gracious, maybe also leave a like. But with all of that out of the way, why do I think we're going to be seeing an E3 style 2021 Nintendo Direct? Now I say E3 style because I'm not entirely sure what's going on with E3. The live event for E3 was cancelled, and we're not entirely sure what they're going to be doing with their digital plans, but regardless, I do think Nintendo will have some sort of event around this time. But let's first talk about this E3 situation a little bit more. So just let me read this excerpt from Videogameschronicle. In a new report published by the Board of Los Angeles Convention and Tourism Development Commission, a sales update lists E3 2021 as a cancelled live event. The document states that the convention board is working with E3 organizer, the Entertainment Software Association, ESA, on broadcast options at the Los Angeles Convention Center and the nearby LA Live complex. The city board also claims it's working on a 2022 and 2023 license for E3. So from this, we know that yes, there won't be a physical event going on. But that doesn't mean E3 is fully canceled. I think some people have read the headlines here of E3 being canceled, and they made the assumption that around that early June period, we won't be getting a whole deluge of gaming information. I'm not so sure that's going to be the case. Here, they are saying that they are still working on broadcasting options. This is news that we've already known about. They are working to still have some sort of digital presentation. The news we got about a week or so ago when they reported this was that the live event would be canceled. There's still some hope for an organized E3 live presentation across the week around that early June period. It's not set in stone yet. A lot of this is dependent upon major gaming companies being on board, so we're not entirely sure if this is going to all happen. But the point is, E3 itself hasn't been entirely canceled. There's still a hope and a plan to have that deluge of gaming information as we have gone all throughout the years since 1995. The only real exception has been 2020, and we still got news around that period, just other gaming companies like Nintendo sort of waited a little bit longer, or a while longer actually. But I think what a lot of people will sort of argue is that E3 has been trending downwards for years, and this whole pandemic situation leading to the cancellation last year really is just speeding up the process. That E3 is dead, and we're moving beyond that. I'm not going to entirely disagree with that idea, because we have seen the major gaming companies sort of pull away and have their own more personal private events. The Nintendo Direct, the PlayStation presentations, the Xbox presentations. These companies are doing things on their own separately. They want to sort of control their message, hence why Nintendo has gone with the terminology Nintendo Direct. They want to be direct with their fan base. So yes, they've shied away from those live big press conferences, and that is a direction we are heading in, to have more personal, more direct presentations from these big gaming companies. But it doesn't mean there isn't still room to have these big live events where smaller companies can get involved. Not to mention the big gaming companies still have, assuming there's no pandemic, they still have a presence at E3. It's still an environment, a situation where a lot of press can come in, some fans can come in and play demos of these big new games, so people can talk about them and report about them, so we learn more about these games, so they sell better later on in the year or beyond when they come out. So there's still value here, even for the big gaming companies. Sure, there are other events where this can happen, but E3 is still one of the bigger events where this happens. So I don't think E3 is necessarily going away anytime soon. But let's focus on the Nintendo side of things here. Because Nintendo didn't have any Direct last year, a lot of people are thinking that we won't be seeing anything like that this year either. But as I've said in previous videos, 2020 is an aberration. We shouldn't look to that as the example for what's to come in the future. It's a very strange situation. We didn't get a general Nintendo Direct all throughout 2020, but then shortly into 2021, guess what happened? We did get a Nintendo Direct, the February 2021 Nintendo Direct. Now, a lot of people saw that Direct, and yeah, some people were excited about what we saw, but other people felt like it left a lot to be desired. And I think part of the problem with that is that a lot of people sort of expected that this presentation would make up for all the lost time since September of 2019 when we got the last Nintendo Direct. But that's not my impression. My impression is that this Nintendo Direct is the mark of Nintendo going back to a norm. They needed to have more announcements around the February time, because if we go back to February, sure, 3D World plus Bowser's Fury and Bravely Default 2, two Nintendo published titles were coming out around then, and then the paid exclusive Monster Hunter Rise is coming out this March, and then beyond that, all we know about is the Nintendo published new Pokemon Snap. Yes, there are other big third-party games coming out around this time, but in terms of projects that Nintendo's putting their money behind, we were running out of knowledge on what's to come, because we were already in February, and all we knew about what's to come in March and April. We were getting to that point where Nintendo needed to start making announcements, considering that we are now a little bit past the biggest issue for the pandemic in terms of the gaming industry. I'm not saying we're still not dealing with issues, we are, but the gaming industry has adapted since then. So during that time, it was a lot harder for Nintendo to sort of deliver information. They're still figuring things out. Now they're sort of figuring things out, trying to get back to a norm. So what I think that means is that we're not going to be getting announcements for games 2 weeks in advance. It's going to be at least a few months. And sure enough, as we had predicted on the channel, that they would have a February Nintendo Direct, because we were getting to that point where we need to know more about other games beyond April. And that's what happened. So with that in mind, let's consider what we do know about now, and when Nintendo will need to start talking about things going beyond. So obviously, we're getting the big third-party exclusive Monster Hunter Rise that Nintendo definitely has put money into to make sure it's a timed exclusive, but then going beyond that, we're getting new Pokemon Snap in April, then Miitopia in May, and then in June, Mario Golf, and then in July, Skyward Sword HD. We do not know about anything else beyond then. Well, technically we know about Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl for late 2022, but it still doesn't have a hard date yet, and that's it. We don't know about anything else in terms of release dates or games that are coming out this year. So before Skyward Sword HD comes out, Nintendo will need to start talking about other things. And conveniently, or maybe intentionally, June is right before then. The June time is that time where we usually get those big E3 presentations, early June. That's how it's been since 1995. We've been getting some sort of E3-like presentation every single year from Nintendo. 2020 was the only exception. So I don't think that's going to be changing this time around. One, considering the historical precedent, but also two, because Nintendo's going to need to start making more announcements, but also three, we've already seen that Nintendo's returning to a bit of a norm with that general Nintendo Direct. Looking at previous years, there was information that came in the early part of the year, then the mid part of the year, the E3 presentation, and then the late part of the year. Looking at 2021, it's seeming to be fairly similar. We got that big 50-minute Nintendo Direct for February, and then a week later we got the Pokemon Presents. To me, it's seeming like it's very similar to 2017, 2018, 2019, not 2020. I do think we will be seeing some major information around that June period. It's all kind of adding up in my opinion. But there's another element to this that I think we should be considering, and that's The Legend of Zelda. So we know that we are supposed to get the sequel to Breath of the Wild 2 details later this year. That's what AJ Inua told us during the February Nintendo Direct, but also when they revealed Age of Calamity last year as well. He's been continually telling us to just wait a little bit longer. There will be an event where there will be more details told to us. And during the February Direct, it was confirmed that they plan on doing it this year. Really, to me, it feels like that they are just waiting to have a massive blowout for Breath of the Wild 2. I'm really just thinking that we're looking at a situation similar to how we had a massive blowout for Breath of the Wild 1. Think about it. Going into E3 2016, all we had were a few teases for Breath of the Wild. And during that time, it was the Wii U era. We didn't really have much to look forward to, so Nintendo had to sort of rely on Breath of the Wild hype to sort of keep us going, so they gave us a few more teases than we really needed. It's a different situation than now, because we have a whole bunch of other things to worry about and play and be excited about, so they don't always have to tease Breath of the Wild 2 to keep us Nintendo fans engaged. My point is that if you exclude the additional teases of Breath of the Wild 1, I believe we are looking at a situation where, like Breath of the Wild 1 at E3 2016, for E3 2021, we will be getting a massive blowout for Breath of the Wild 2. I think it makes a lot of sense. So supposedly there will be Zelda 35th anniversary things going on this year. We've already had a few interesting Zelda announcements with Skyward Sword HD and those Joy-Cons and the Age of Calamity DLC, but there is an overall impression that there will be more things going on. We have seen a lot of trademarks for different pieces of merchandising, and there have been also some rumors and hints towards other Zelda games coming out throughout this year as well, so it does seem like there's a possibility there. And while we didn't get a Zelda-focused Direct in February, as I've talked about beforehand, during that February Direct, we did have a little bit more of a Zelda focus than other franchises, so they started the Zelda conversation, but they didn't go fully out here. And historically speaking, usually Nintendo saves the Zelda anniversary celebrations for later into the year when they have their big holiday release. Personally, I do think Breath of the Wild 2 will make it out by the end of the year in conjunction with the Switch Pro, which has been reported by Bloomberg, but that's a whole other topic for another video. Regardless of when Breath of the Wild 2 comes out, though, be it November, October, or March of 2022, I do feel like there's going to be a massive blowout this E3 time, and they will also talk about other Zelda things as well. If you consider what we're getting for the Age of Calamity DLC, we're supposed to get that first wave this June, and then the second wave later into the year. June is the E3 time, and we didn't really get any footage for this DLC. Wouldn't it make sense to have a big Nintendo Direct with a fair bit of a Zelda focus, and in there they talk about multiple Zelda things, including this Age of Calamity DLC, they finally show off what this DLC will be in terms of actual footage, and then they shadow drop Wave 1 for Age of Calamity. But then, because it's also just a few weeks before the release of Skyward Sword HD, we get another look at that game before it comes out, and then Nintendo goes into more announcements for Zelda. They have a full blowout for Breath of the Wild 2, and maybe they also have a couple other releases announced for the leading up to the end of the fiscal year. Timing-wise, I think this is what makes the most sense. We are supposed to get a big event revealing Breath of the Wild 2. Historically speaking, assuming it's not a pandemic year, we still get a summertime E3 Direct. There are still plans for a digital event for E3 for different companies, at this point at least, and there is a need for Nintendo to make more announcements around that time. It's very similar to how we didn't know about the February Nintendo Direct, but it did seem like that was the right time to start making game announcements because we were getting to that point where we didn't know what was coming too much later. Usually, gaming companies, Nintendo included, has to make announcements for products a couple months in advance so they can set up pre-orders and things of that nature. So having a big E3 presentation this June, to me, makes a lot of sense. Not to mention there are other games that need to be discussed and revealed. There are rumors for a Fire Emblem remake, Donkey Kong, Metroid, maybe a new Mario Party, maybe a new Monolith game. There's a lot of things that need to be discussed and talked about because they need to announce and release games throughout the second half of 2021, which I would say is more likely going to be a bigger, better part of the year than the first half, because that's how it's always been for every single year throughout the history of Nintendo. So if you think the first half of 2021 is pretty good, I think it's reasonable to expect that the second half will be even better, because that's how it's always been. So those announcements are coming. Potentially Nintendo could shy away from E3, maybe they time their big mid-year presentation a little bit away from the presentation. That's certainly a possibility. But I do think that early June period, give or take a few weeks, is when we should expect a big, massive Nintendo Direct to talk about their plans for the rest of the year. That's what makes the most sense. They need to do it at some point. They need to have this Breath of the Wild 2 event. So I'm definitely thinking we are going to be seeing the return of an E3-style 2021 Nintendo Direct. But what do you guys think? Do you guys think we're going to be seeing the return of the E3 Nintendo Direct? Do you think it's going to be a big, massive event revealing a whole bunch of details about Breath of the Wild 2? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Anyways, everyone, this is On Just Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care.